Alright, welcome back to game 2 between Stock and Dimi, this week's community challenge. So, this was originally going to be best of 1, but Dimi's asked for a rematch, and I think we've got a little bit of time before Alex and Ninja have to play. So we'll switch to their game after this, which I think will just be best of 1, but see what they want to do. After that, that might be it. Otherwise, if we can, I'll try and get Aries versus Madlib organised. Otherwise, I might have to call it that, guys, because I'm starting to need to have my lunch. I've been doing commentary from 11 AM to 1 PM my time, so I'm fading away to a shadow. So, Stock's going to go for early barracks here. Dimi's actually going to find all these central sheep here, because there's actually packs of 3 sheep in the center of the map. Normally you've only got packs of 2, which you'll find on the outskirts of this map as well. Dimi's going to go for an early barracks, so our players be hoping to try and go for the tried and true barracks town center opening. Just get as much map control in the early game as they can while they take that town center, or at least have the melee to help defend themselves, to place a town center that'll help them in the later stages of the game, like actually having it on another hunt or a second gold mine and stone, the other side of a wood line, things like that, just to really help give themselves good mid to late game eco. Because there's no point in sort of opening with a instant second town center if your opponent's got spearmen on top of where you were going to put it, and so you're forced to put it right next to your town center, and after you've been pushed off the hunt, you've been pushed around on your wood line. So Dimi trying to cross the map here. Stock's going to scout this out. Stock going to produce his own Sparrow at the moment, so he's going to put our players under a bit of pressure to get a second storehouse and a house in reasonable time here. Dimi already having to commit to another house. And the thing is as well, you're likely to want to get your storehouse back inside the range of your town center, as well as this first house that you're going for, because if you get pushed off your hunt, you're going to lose that too. Persians with the A tent, it's a really nice upgrade to have here, so it forces Dimi to have to confirm kills here, whereas for Stock, if he can pull back a couple of low units and heal them up, while he also deals damage across Dimi's army, provided he's not really losing anything, he can just bounce back here. That villager's going to get healed, the Sparrow is going to get healed. Really the only thing that the Celts are relying on is just having the mobility to be able to disengage. They've got faster spearmen, Sparrow 6 speed, the Spear's 7 speed. A lot of sheep under Dimi's control though, so he gets 1 or 2 villages to gather from those. He's got a lot of safe food there directly under the town center. Good number of spears as well. Maybe committing to this food eco at the moment, because Celts, you actually save resources with your A drops in theory, but you've also got to get more overall food to get it. So it's 300 food versus 200 food, 200 wood for the other civs. On top of that, with Celt, you can't just make it straight away. You've got to make sure you get 3 houses, so that's technically another 150 wood, but you are obviously going to use the houses as well. So in the long run, it does save you that 150 wood, but the short term, it does mean you've got to front load the cost. The beauty is, Celts, their spears only costing food, so no gold cost, and they're only being a 40 resource unit. The Spar is a 50 resource unit and gonna cost gold, but not as much as other early game Age 1 units. So Pez is also one of the civs that can get away with spamming out quite a big number of units early on. Stock's just going to go to second town center. Dimi's going to do the same. Our players fairly even in terms of vill count, but Dimi's actually ahead by 2 villages at the moment. I think Stock might have had a slight housing there. It's actually a little bit late on this next villager now. There we go. But just little things like that will slowly put you behind a player that is playing economically perfectly, or macro-mechanically perfectly. It's a nice position for that house there. It's going to make it very hard for the spears to fit through. They still can, but it just slows them down, makes it harder to hit the wood gatherers in particular. Right now, Dimi is up by about 8 population, so he's up by about 7 military pop at the moment. He's got a big number of spears there. Sparrows here for stock, well outnumbered, although they are going to be fighting on top of their own storehouses, so they will get that benefit. Dimi, stock's taken handsaw and hunting dogs. Dimi, no early game eco-techs. Does have that military advantage, but he's going to have to try and get some value out of it. It might even be worth killing that storehouse there, just because later on when your opponent's trying to get on top of these resources, it's actually going to act like a healing tower, whereas the other civs, if you see storehouses out in the mid-map, really, unless you're intending to raid from that angle later on, you don't have to worry about killing them, because your opponent's always going to put down a storehouse closer to the actual resources. So Dimi's able to fit in a couple of long swordsmen here, but he's also going to want to make sure he gets anti-ranged. The Persian player will be wanting to go for bowmen, which the Celts player is not going to have access to here, so you're going to need to get your own range for slingers to help protect these guys. Keep up spear production, because obviously the Persian access to cavalry an age earlier than you do. They're going to be really painful for your range, so you're going to need to keep some spearman production up, but also having some longswords just to be able to cut through this front line quicker, because you don't have a back line that cuts through infantry quickly early on. It's Celt have to optimize 2 different types of infantry here, but Persia have to optimize their 2 different types of infantry, plus the bowmen and the Asabara, the stables units. Things slowing down a little bit here. Stock going for 2 ranges. Got the second town centre up. Dimi's got his second town centre not very far away, so 26 vills to 27. Stock slightly ahead in that regard now, having had that second town centre finish up earlier, so he's got double TC production. Dimi's going to struggle a little bit for food here, actually. He's going to have to get a good number of vills on the food, because Celt quite greedy, particularly with this level of infantry opening. Quite greedy on the food. Haven't really got any ranges or any sacred groves out for your priest units. So druids in particular early on, with their area healing and area damage boost. Can I add those in quick? But Dimi first off needs to get the food to actually get there. He's going to add the grove. Right now he's got mainly just infantry up against a mixed composition here for stock. So Spara, no benefit against any unit type, but they are just a nice general tank, and they trade reasonably under ranged fire. Well, the bow is going to be very threatening to this infantry front line. Slinger production's really only just started here for Dimi at the moment. He's adding in hunting dogs now. Stock going to get conditioning. The players going to be pretty much even in terms of their upgrades. Hunting dogs and handsaw. No other early eco upgrades here. Stock adding another barracks. He's not going to worry about stables transition just yet. He wants to make sure he can kill all these spears off first and then look at adding in Asabara, because then he can hopefully, in his vision, force his opponent to making too many longs, and then have Asabara tank them while his bowmen shoot over the top. Dimi, on the other hand, hoping to get enough slingers to try and threaten the bowman bull, but not overproduce slingers, so that he's got enough of a melee front line of either spears or longswords to really be able to cut through the Asabara and the early game barracks production for the Persian. Obviously he's mainly going to be making Sparabar, not really going to worry about spearmen at all, because Celts not going to have any early game cavalry. Unlock those in age 3, the 1 civ. No access to early game cav. Persia on the other hand, having to wait for age 3 to get their dedicated counter infantry unit. It's a barred hall here for Dimi, so this is actually a unique building for those Celt infantry upgrades. So Celts have the fastest moving and hardest hitting infantry, particularly once you factor in these upgrades, which are their unique paths, while Persia, they get their own boosted unique infantry unit. They've also got their own unique techs. They've actually got toggle techs to enable for increased villager or increased military production. That'll cost them resources, while in the late game, Celt's going to be able to actually sacrifice their sacred deer, which can also be gathered from, in order to get some powerful buffs like increased global damage or increased damage versus buildings, increased production time, things like that. They're temporary buffs. They will cost you a little bit of wood, but definitely worth activating. Druids instantly kicking into battle, giving a nice damage boost here for Dimi's army. Stock, in the meanwhile, probably needs to start his production up again here. Dimi's production being constant, but Stock's going into this with a 20 pop lead at the moment, so 48 vills to 50, so Stock is still ahead in the worker count, but he also had a bit of a gap with his villager production there. Dimi's also stopped producing villagers for a sec here, and his military production is a tad late. He needs to get a front line up here though, because these slingers are having a retreat. Not much of a front line left here for Stock, but it's enough that if the slingers attack it, the bows will actually trade favourably here into the slingers. So Stock really upping that military production. Once again, Dimi going to add more druids into the mix as well, so he had all of his druids fall over there, so that's also when it's time to really back out for the Celt, because you don't get that damage steroid, you don't get that area healing. Persia, on the other hand, having to rely on either coming home and standing under defensively placed storehouses, or even looking at forward building the storehouses to support the military, but obviously it's going to cost you a bit of gathering time, because you've got to bring the villagers forward to actually build them, and on top of that, it's going to set you back resources wise. Dimi with some quick defensive towers here, so it's going to be painful for Stock to push into now, because even though the Sparabar are great tanks under tower fire and town center fire, the bowmen definitely aren't, and they are also a crucial part of this Persian composition at the moment. So Dimi is going to have a great defender's advantage, provided he's patient enough to cop it. Loses that house he had at the start, but sort of far enough into the game that he can just eat that loss. Meanwhile, the tower is placed so that it actually does pick off a unit there. Stock's actually going to go for Age 3, get Chisel as well. Start getting armory upgrades and his Age 3 town centre. Dimi, for the moment, trailing on population, so he's going to be looking to try and get as close to maxed out in Age 2 here as possible, and just hope his opponent pushes in a bit too quickly. Or even if he can try and get on top of something of Stock's here, he can start putting him behind. Stock 65 villages, Dimi 59 at the moment. A small eco lead there for Stock, and again I think he is in a bit of a lead all round with quicker Age 3. Starting up on those armory techs, he's got a slight buffer in terms of the overall population and eco pop, military pop. But Dimi is definitely not in a lost position at this stage. It's a good number of slingers there. It's really going to dissuade too much more bowman production beyond this, and in fact if Dimi can get through enough of the front line that he can get the slingers to attack the back line, he can actually really win a trade here quite quickly. But he's also going to have to try and hold out, get his own Age 3, get Woad Raiders and Horsemen out in the field. Because honestly, Druid, Horseman, Woad Raider, Celt Bowman is like the best Age 3 composition, hands down. But it does take a bit to get there, particularly if you fall behind against civs like Persia or Babylon. It can be extremely painful. Dimi, Age 3 coming in. 71 vills to Stock 70, so very even in that regard, but Stock starting on his armory technologies. Dimi not quite started on those just yet, but at the same time, if he starts them now, he won't be as far behind on the armory techs as he was last game. So Stock just testing the waters. He doesn't exactly know how much Dimi's got there, but right now he's got a slight lead in that regard. Dimi's still needing to max out those last couple of population spaces, so it's always a good time to push when that's the case. If he waits until Dimi gets to 160 pop, things could actually start to move against him. Dimi's actually invested in double armory, and a third one finishing up. The Stock obviously only has the one, so if Dimi can cram in all these upgrades, and he's already crammed in all of his Bard Hall upgrades, he can actually start to pull ahead in terms of upgrades, but this range, the backline Stock is really going to hit Dimi's front line extremely hard. And Dimi, in the meanwhile, he doesn't have the slingers focusing down the bowman. His own front line just gets deleted at the moment. Hasn't quite got enough to break through that Persian front line to get to the back line. He needs to focus on the back line with these slingers to really optimize the amount of damage they do. So they only do 7 damage, which is pretty pitiful. They deal 4 times that to ranged units. Bowman, on the other hand, 12 damage, so almost twice as much. But they only deal 2.25 times bonus to their infantry targets. So but Dimi just needs to focus with his slingers on the Persian backline a little better. Just, you know, when the fight goes down, select a group of 5 or 6 and just shift-click a bunch of bowmen. Select another group, shift-click another bunch of bowmen. And then if you need to, then worry about moving them back and just having them attack whatever's nearest. You know, it's something that people need to do a little bit better, I think, particularly with counter-ranged units, although this choke point is really going to be hard for Stock to shove into, but he can actually start sieging some of these buildings up here, because he does actually have good armory techs, a good military size. The bowman count is going to be a little bit of a hindrance here. They don't quite cut through the buildings at the same speed as the infantry, but in a way, engaging like this, he can bleed a couple of bowmen out, replace them with immortals and Sparabara, and actually put himself in the position where he can tank a lot more under the towers, under the town centres, and actually push to win here. So Shield Wall is also going to make his infantry, his Sparas, more susceptible to the damage from the spears and Dimi's long swordsmen, but at the same time they can absorb so much more siege damage, which isn't really a problem at this stage, but so much more pierce damage as well. And this is rough for Dimi because he's going to lose a bunch of villagers here. He's down to 73, Stock's up to 84, and has that town centre advantage over his opponent for the time being. So Dimi had a bit of a population disadvantage at the moment. Mind game, Stock leaving it alive on 2 health. At the same time, it's a healthy number of slingers, so you can't attack from a wrong angle, or can't run away from a bad angle either, because you can risk losing a lot of bowmen. Dimi, in the meanwhile, adding in horsemen, adding in a couple of loads, wonderful charge units, but he really needs to get them straight on top of the back line as best he can here. They stop putting some good pressure on, but Dimi gathering out towards this left side of the map really well. Shut down on that right side, but at the same time, Stock's not really been putting a huge amount of emphasis on denying everything he can over here at the sides of the map. He may look at spreading down that way for his own gathering very shortly though, so it might get tough for Dimi, because then it'll draw him out of his base, out of the safety of the seven guard towers that he's got here, so it's a hell of a commitment. You know, that's 1.5k resources basically there. And even though that means everything when your opponent's pushing into you, now Dimi is going to be late on this 3rd age town centre, so he's down on 20 pop, so in order to be able to uproot and take fights anywhere on the map, he's at a slight discrepancy now. Stock, in the meanwhile, has added his 2nd armory, and he's at the position where I think he can add a lot more of these age 3 technology, so he's going to get age 3 damage in both melee and range. While Dimi's, even though he's gone for 3 archery ranges, he's still lacking some of his age 2 upgrades. So perhaps he could have stuck with only 2 of them, but happened to take some of the upgrades slightly further. Stock going to age 4 now, so he's in a wonderful spot at the moment. Not overplaying things, although I think he could actually afford to really start hitting these sides of the map. And Dimi's in the spot where he actually probably needs to start being active around the map with Woad Raiders and or Horsemen at the moment. Probably needs to try and sacrifice some of these slingers to get more Woads in the mix or get more Horsemen in the mix too, because right now he's not able to stick around in fights long enough to command all of his slingers to attack the actual counter here. While they're chipping away at Immortals and Sparabara, they're really not maximizing their value. Dimi adding some of his H3 Bard Hall upgrades, getting the rest of his H2 Armory upgrades. Stock, H3 damage upgrades have kicked in. The Golden Age is nearly finished, so he'll be able to go for a 4th Town Center. Must be able to push with a 200 pop maxed out army here. So I think Dimi is going to have to start getting creative around the map here. Stock is playing quite smart around the map here. He's not really overextending, but Dimi trailing on military. Going to have to make something happen here. Also trailing on eco slightly. This way he's now starting to make Stock chase him a little bit. He's starting to get an idea of where his opponent's gathering, what he might be starting to be short of in terms of resources. Stock's Golden Age has kicked in, so that's actually, you know, a nearly 4,000 resource commitment the opponent's now made. So if the time to deal some damage is going to present itself, it's probably now, because otherwise you're going to start falling behind from in terms of Age 4 upgrades. Dimi now adding some Age 3 upgrades here, so he's now really able to make use of triple armory, but till now he sort of hasn't been able to get as much value out of it as he could have. This run by with the Horsemen, it's not going to get a huge amount of kill value, but at the same time it takes a lot of pressure off Dimi's own base, and on top of that he gets a bit of an idea of where his opponent's been gathering from. Can pressure over here now, pick up another couple of villages, but the one problem with this is, well, it's a lot of villages he's actually forced to flee there. One problem with this is, though, is that Stock is now going to be able to start meeting him halfway outside of the safety of the towers and the town centers. Dimi, still no Age 3 town center. Stock has his Age 3 and 4 town center. Starting to get some Age 4 upgrades like close combat expertise. So, extra tanky units. Immortal Chant is going to be really handy as well. Nice raid with the Horsemen, so Stock just keeping everything together at the moment. He's not really splitting his army up, which is a bit of a blessing and a curse. Like, if he runs into the Horsemen, he will just evaporate them with this many units. But at the same time, he's not able to cover for the gold mines until he's already lost some villages. So he's having to try and wall up a little bit. These resources off to the side as well. He probably wants to try and lock this down, because he's eventually going to want to put a market about here so he can trade to one of these back town centers. Dimi, on the other hand, under a little bit of pressure now. Probably wanted to add some gold mines over the actual gold deposits rather than using storehouses, because he gets a little bit of extra conservation there, which is really worthwhile in the late game, because it helps delay that caravan economy, no matter which civ you are. But GG. Dimi calls it there. I think he realizes it's just going to be too hard for him to come back. Get the army safely at home. He's just worried that he'll never be able to take a fight while down in age, down 20 pop and some upgrades. And Stock takes the series 2-0.